On a quiet summer day in June 1965, police in Houston, Texas, were asked to perform a welfare check on an elderly couple no one had heard from in days. Their home sat still and silent, curtains drawn, doors locked, giving away nothing. When officers forced their way inside, they didn't find signs of a break-in or a struggle. The living room was neat, the furniture untouched. In the kitchen, there were dishes and food left out, as if someone had been in the middle of an ordinary day and simply stepped away. But the stillness inside the house felt unnatural, like something had been interrupted. Before we go further, if you enjoy real-life stories like this, stories that stay with you long after they end, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the deeper this story goes, the darker it gets. One of the officers walked toward the refrigerator and slowly opened it. Inside were neatly arranged pieces of what looked like meat, clean, pale, and cut with unsettling precision. For a brief moment, it didn't register as anything unusual. Then his eyes adjusted. The shape, the texture, and then the realization hit. These were human remains. As he pulled back in shock, he saw two severed heads inside. The victims were Fred and Edwina Rogers. Fred and Edwina Rogers were an elderly couple who had lived quietly in that home for years. They kept to themselves and weren't known to have any major conflicts with neighbors or relatives. From the outside, nothing about their lives suggested the kind of horror that would eventually be discovered inside their home. But what made the situation even more unsettling was who else lived there with them: their adult son, Charles Rogers. Charles Rogers was intelligent and highly educated. He had served as a Navy pilot and worked professionally as a seismologist, studying movements beneath the Earth's surface. Despite this background, he lived a very private and isolated life. Neighbors barely knew he existed. Some had never even seen him. He kept a strict routine, leaving the house before sunrise and returning late at night, avoiding interaction with almost everyone around him. Inside the home, the relationship between Charles and his parents appeared distant in an unusual and almost uncomfortable way. It was widely reported that they rarely spoke directly. Instead, communication happened through written notes slipped under doors, as though verbal interaction had been replaced entirely by silence. Three people living under one roof, yet functioning like strangers sharing a space rather than a family sharing a life. There was also no indication of a vibrant or social household. No frequent visitors, no known gatherings, and very little visible interaction with the outside world. Neighbors described the home as quiet and closed off, almost detached from the surrounding community. This lack of connection suggested a long-standing emotional distance between the occupants. When investigators later reviewed the situation, they found no clear warning signs in the days leading up to the crime. No reported arguments, no calls for help, and no disturbances that would have alerted anyone nearby. Whatever happened inside that house appears to have developed silently, behind closed doors, without drawing attention from the outside world. When investigators began examining the bodies, the brutality of the crime became clear. Fred Rogers had been beaten to death with a hammer. The attack was violent and repeated, suggesting a level of force driven by emotion or conflict. His body was further mutilated, including the removal of his eyes, a detail that added an even darker layer to the scene. Edwina Rogers, on the other hand, had been shot in the head. Her death appeared quicker and more controlled. The contrast between their deaths suggested different approaches within the same crime, one prolonged and violent, the other swift and deliberate. Police found items believed to have been used in the murder, including a claw hammer, scissors, and a keyhole saw. True crime enthusiasts may be amazed to see the investigators handling these items with their bare hands. Glove wearing at an active crime scene became standard practice in 1924. To protect law enforcement from biohazardous substances and avoid placing fingerprints. Consideration of cross-contamination during evidence collection and processing did not fully materialize until the development of DNA analysis in the 1980s. The training films from that era reveal how law enforcement conducted investigations around the time of the Rogers double homicide. After the murders, the killer did not flee immediately. Instead, he remained inside the house and began a methodical process. The bodies were moved, drained of blood, and carefully dismembered. Each piece was cleaned and arranged inside the refrigerator. Internal organs were removed, some cut into smaller sections and disposed of through the plumbing system. The level of organization and cleanliness suggested that the person responsible took their time and understood how to avoid leaving behind obvious traces. The house itself was cleaned with unusual thoroughness. Despite the nature of the crime, investigators found very little blood or physical evidence, indicating that the scene had been carefully managed after the killings. This level of control pointed towards someone who acted deliberately rather than impulsively, someone who remained calm enough to carry out a detailed cleanup before leaving. At the center of the investigation was the couple's son, Charles Rogers. When police searched the home, he was missing. There were no clear signs that he had been taken against his will, and no evidence of a struggle involving him. His belongings were still there, but he himself had vanished completely. Based on the available evidence, investigators quickly identified him as the primary suspect. A nationwide search began. Authorities circulated his description and checked transportation hubs, borders, and known locations he might have traveled to. Given his intelligence and background, investigators believed he could have planned an escape using his knowledge and possible connections. However, despite extensive efforts, no confirmed sightings of him were ever reported. He seemed to have disappeared without leaving a trace. As the investigation stalled, different theories began to emerge. One explanation focused on possible long-term tension within the family. The unusual living arrangement, the lack of communication, and the emotional distance suggested that conflict may have existed beneath the surface for years. Some believed that the situation had gradually built up until it eventually reached a breaking point. Other theories focused on Charles Rogers himself. His education, military background, and technical expertise led some to believe he may have had the skills needed to both carry out the crime and disappear afterward. Although there were occasional claims linking him to intelligence-related activities, none of these were ever proven. There were also theories that he fled the country, possibly traveling to Mexico or elsewhere, where he could assume a new identity. In the absence of confirmed sightings, this remains speculation. Others believed he may not have survived long after the murders, suggesting his disappearance could have ended quietly without discovery. Over time, as leads disappeared and no new evidence emerged, the case lost momentum. Without a body, a confession, or confirmed whereabouts, the investigation reached a standstill. In 1975, 10 years after the murders, Charles Rogers was declared legally dead due to the prolonged absence of any evidence of life. The house where the crime occurred was eventually demolished, erasing the physical location tied to the tragedy. Yet the story remained, preserved through records and retellings. The Icebox murders continue to stand as one of the most unsettling unsolved cases, not only because of the brutality involved, but because of the precision of the act and the complete disappearance that followed. Even today, the case leaves behind more questions than answers, a reminder that some crimes are not just about what happened, but about what was never fully uncovered.